leader.
Mr. Speaker, may I just remind ourselves that seats have not actually been yet properly allocated in the chamber. So if you direct him to go to his seat, he probably does. Well,
Honorable members, order. Honorable Brahma, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, grooming is allowed.
Honorable Doyo, I have given the floor to Honorable Brahma.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Brahma, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, let me express my deepest condolences to the family of the late Ms. Bao Shaibu, and also take this opportunity to appeal to the youth of Ejura to remain calm and allow due process to take its course. While I strongly condemn the violent destruction of the Ejura police station, I urge all stakeholders to address this matter with the seriousness that it deserves to prevent future unfortunate incidents in the future. Mr. Speaker, the ravaging of the Ejura police station through fire by a rampaging youth following the death of Ms. Bao Shaibu in police custody is deeply regrettable. I appeal to the youth of Ejura to exercise restraint and avoid actions that jeopardize community resources. The destroyed property does not belong to the Ghana Police Service personnel, but to the people of Ejura. The Ejura Police Station, built before Ghana's independence, has served the community for decades, providing vital law enforcement services. It is therefore unfortunate that events of January 11, 2025 led to its total destruction. Mr. Speaker, this tragic incident could have been avoided with better handling by the police. The late Ms. Bao Shaibu, a young man in his 20s, was alleged to have bought a stolen phone. On the evening of January 10, 2025, the police invited him to the station via a phone call. He complied, arriving on his motorbike with the alleged stolen phone. After interrogation, he was taken into custody. Despite his plea to return home and report back the next day, which included an offer to leave behind his motorbike and phone, his request was denied. He reportedly told the police he was unwell and having just arrived from the Amantin market. Mr. Speaker, while in custody, Ms. Bao Shaib complained of abdominal pain and began vomiting. When his condition worsened, the police took him to the Ejura Government Hospital where he passed away. Without informing his family, the police moved his body to Mampo in the early hours of January 11, 2025. When the family arrived at the police station that morning to visit him, they were informed of his death. This news, understandably, infuriated them, and word spread that Ms. Bao had died in police custody due to police brutality. Mr. Speaker, the youth, angered by the news, began gathering at the police station. Sensing danger, the police evacuated inmates, documents, and firearms to the divisional headquarters. At approximately about 7 a.m., I received a call from the municipal crime officer about the escalating situation. Though I was in Accra, I immediately contacted the assemblyman for the Kotokoi Line electoral area, who was at the scene and urged him to appeal to the youth for calm. I also advised the police to call for reinforcements. The divisional commander assured me that reinforcements were on their way from Mampong and Insuta. Mr. Speaker, Despite these efforts, the situation deteriorated. After 30 minutes, I received several calls about the growing unrest at the station. I contacted the Ashanti North Regional Police Commander and the commander of the Army Detachment, Lieutenant Ifa, requesting immediate intervention. Unfortunately, promised reinforcements never arrived, and the police station was set ablaze by the rampaging youths. Later, Mr. Speaker, the municipal crime officer called me to request that the assemblyman inform the family to meet them at the police barrier for the release of Ms. Bao's body. I implored on them not to release the body amid the disturbances and appealed to the divisional and regional commanders to prioritize an autopsy before handing over the body. Despite my plea, the body was released without an autopsy. However, I later coordinated with the police and the medical superintendent to ensure an autopsy was performed by a pathologist from Kumasi. This step was crucial to establish the cause of death and address public concern. Mr. Speaker, the sequence of events clearly demonstrates that if the police had acted professionally and proactively, this tragic incident and the destruction of the police station could have been averted. The evacuation of inmates and sensitive material shows that the police anticipated the potential violence but failed to implement adequate preventive measures. Mr. Speaker, I urgently appeal to the Inspector General of Police to investigate the circumstances leading to this unfortunate incident and hold those responsible accountable. Furthermore, I call on the Interior Minister to prioritize rebuilding the Ejura Police Station and increasing the number of police personnel in the municipality to enhance effective policing. Mr. Speaker, I remain committed to supporting efforts to restore peace and strengthen law enforcement in our community. May the soul of Ms. Bao Shaibu rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Honourable members, any contribution? Honourable Frank Afriye.
Speaker, let me thank you so much. And then, with your leave, congratulate the maker of the statement. And I also wish to convey sincere condolences to the families of the bereaved. Indeed, this should be a trying moment, and we stand in absolute solidarity with them. Mr. Speaker, listening to the maker of the statement, I was almost frozen into speechlessness. Indeed, a healthy, law-abiding young man has been invited by the police. And as a law-abiding citizen, he complied and followed up. Speaker, it is shocking to learn how such a healthy man will go to the police, but will never come back. Indeed, it is something that can agitate our youth anywhere, right from Navrongo to Paga, Afajato to Adaklu, anywhere at all. However, it also shows that increasingly we are becoming a society of violence. The action or reaction of the youth cannot, in any form or shape, be validated. Speaker, using violence, confrontation as a tool to the extent of burning down police station should be condemned with all the force we can marshal. It is intolerable. It is reprehensible. Speaker, it is inexcusable. We cannot tolerate that. And we must, as a matter of time, moving quickly to engage our youth to apply the best tools in their toolbox, even when the situation is dire. Mr. Speaker, but most importantly,
Honourable Member, conclude.
this statement shows that our response time and an approach is defective on occasions like this. The young man complained of stomach ache. What happens to our first aid system? Has there been any first aid system? If there were, would he have passed on? I believe not. Again, from the statement, we are told the police actually envisaged the reaction of the youth. And in the face of all that, they couldn't call for reinforcement. These are very legitimate issues that I think we must consider going forward. But once again, Mr. Speaker, our hearts are with the family in this trying moment. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Any further contribution? Honorable Sanja Nanja.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the statement ably made by Honorable Member for Ejura Sechidumase. Mr. Speaker, of late, the youth of this country, the vandalism associated with them is becoming something very serious, very alarming. Every provocation, government properties are attacked and vandalized. On this very day, on the 11th of January, a similar thing happened in my own constituency. And what was it? Because armed robbers killed a 75-year-old driver. And the drivers and some youth decided to demonstrate against the police with the perception that the police is not doing as expected of them, because armed robbery has become very rampant along the Kumasi Ejura Atebu road. And in the case of Atebu, the only two pickups for patrols were vandalized. And the police were now left unable to go for patrols. I think a serious look must be taken, and normally the youth involved in this will have to be punished. But what do we realize? In most cases, when it happens this way, no proper investigation is done, no arrest is effected. And if something is not done about this and it goes this way, I'm afraid we are sitting on a time bomb, because any government property with little provocation will go to attack. Schools, police station, and the same youth are calling for development, infrastructure development. And the little that we have, the same youth go to destroy them. So I'll call on the police to investigate thoroughly on this issue. With this, Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ntim Fojo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to commend the maker of the statement, Honorable Member for Ejura, Honorable Brima, for bringing to the fore the violence that took place in Ejura in relation to attack on the police station, and to commend the Member of Parliament for his role played in calming the situation so far, and to join him and my other colleagues in signaling our condolences to the families of the deceased. Mr. Speaker, the growing spate of acts of violence in this country, particularly within the span of a month or two, is quite worrying and deserves every condemnation that there is. Much as many have condemned the alleged mishandling of the deceased by the police, it is also equally condemnable any act of violence meted out on the police station that led to its destruction, which now requires same modest resources of the state to be deployed in rebuilding. Mr. Speaker, a society, I always say, is a reflection of what leaders advocate for. And we as political class have acute, particularly so when we see it almost becoming okay that or known military personnel must raid a private, when electoral commission must be attacked for the conduct of their legitimate constitutional duty.
Honorable Intim Fojo, make sure you operate within Order 93.
Mr. Speaker, I'm guided by Order 93. So it is important that all these acts, they dovetail into violences, which undermine the peace that this country enjoys. Consistently for the past 4 or 5 years, the Global Peace Index and many organizations have ranked Ghana as the most peaceful in Africa, even globally as one of the most peaceful in the top 5. The recent one ranked Ghana as second most peaceful in the world, even ahead of Australia and Canada. It is important that we all do our part to consolidate these sterling credentials so we don't undermine the peace and security we all enjoy. It is important that, devoid of politicization, we show leadership in rallying the rest of our society with us, in condemning acts of violence regardless who conducted it. And even one suspect, in the case of the deceased, Mr. Shaibu, even when a suspect is alleged to have conducted a wrongdoing or a crime, they deserve the right to be heard. They deserve the right for fair trial. They don't need to be condemned. Even in the handling of prosecution, their dignity ought to be upheld. So all these are lessons we need to take, and in the consistency with this principle to be applied wherever certain offenses are suspected. With these few words, I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. I proceed to Honorable Sukwaru.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the statement being made by my colleague, Honorable MP for Ejura. Mr. Speaker, this particular issue is very important for us as leaders in this country. Mr. Speaker, police or victims dying in police custody has become something that has been happening for the past few years. Mr. Speaker, I recall on the 1st of March 2023, a woman who is a stroke patient died in a police custody. And sometimes you ask yourself, the kind of investigations the police are conducting, that you would have to keep somebody in your custody more than 24 hours as the law requires. We are all aware that with the recent, sometime back, with the Supreme Court ruling, that says that all offenses are now bailable. And before you can detain somebody more than 24 hours as a police officer for investigations, you need 48 hours. Thank you for the correction. you need to go to court for the court to give you the permission. I am not a lawyer. It's what thank you very much, Mr. Zue, for the correction. You need to go to court for court to give you the permission if you are not done with the investigation, so that the person can either be kept in police custody or can be kept in a prison's custody whilst the investigation would continue. But with this, Mr. Speaker, I think in as much as that I condemn the actions of the youth, I think the police also are supposed to be blamed. If seriousness are attached to matters like this, especially when it has to do with petty, theft issues, police must attach seriousness into the investigation and make sure that these matters are investigated within the laws that are stated. But when you have a victim being kept in your custody more than 48 hours, all in the name of investigation, if something happens to the person, certainly you would see the youth or the relatives certainly, they will certainly react. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would want to use this opportunity to call on the police and all the, security agencies. They should and make sure that when there is a case before them for them to investigate, they must do it within the laws. With these few words, Mr. Speaker, I thank you once again for the opportunity.
Thank you, honorable members. Honorable members, we live in a country governed by law. We are not living in a country in a natural state of war. Honorable members, nobody is above the law. So we should allow the law to operate. We cannot continue to be taking the law into our own hands. Honorable members, police are to protect life and property. We need to realize that Ghanaian and the police are supposed to live coterminously. I would therefore urge the IGP to ensure that this matter is investigated thoroughly and anybody find capable, culpable, should be made to face the full rigors of the law. Honorable members, let me add my voice in thanking the maker of the statement. Honorable members, yesterday there was a statement made by Honorable Deputy Minority Whip. It generated so much debate, and in the course of the debate, Honorable Majority Leader promised to verify some issues and bring it to the fore. I am reliably informed that he is ready to inform the House. After that, I will give the floor to the minority leader, and no one else is entitled to contribute to the issue. I will therefore give the floor to the majority leader. But, honorable members, we must be circumspect and operate within Standing Order 93.5. Honorable Majority Leader, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as you rightly indicated, yesterday, the Deputy Minority Whip sought leave of the Speaker and the indulgence of the House to raise a matter that he thought was of urgent public importance. Specifically, he raised two issues, one pertaining to some press conference of the Special Prosecutor at the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Secondly, he drew attention to a joint police-military entry into the private residence of the former Minister of Finance, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta. Mr. Speaker, the statement drew a lot of debate, following some commentary, and I promised this House that I will carry out some investigation to try and appreciate the circumstances surrounding the joint police and military entry into the private residence of the former Minister of Finance. In making this statement today, let me indicate that as a country and as a parliament, we have a constitution to uphold. That constitution has embedded in it fundamental human rights, including the right to one's privacy, the right to the integrity of one's property, and His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama remains committed to ensure that the rights and liberties of every individual is respected or are respected. Mr. Speaker, secondly, I make this statement on the basis of the commitment of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama to reset this country, which means that everybody must act in compliance with the law and the mandate of institutions. And so I have called the relevant stakeholders in the matter to find out exactly what happened. So, Speaker, it is true that the private residence of the former Minister of Finance was entered into by operatives of the military and the police led by the somebody who we believe works at the National Security Coordinator's Office. Mr. Speaker, his name is Mr. Jakwa. Mr. Speaker, we have investigated the matter, and we want to say and assure our colleagues in this House that we have received assurances from the Office of the National Security Coordinator that it was not intended that that should happen, and that occurrence is most regrettable and unfortunate, and he wants to give this House his word and assurance that a thing like that should never happen again. Mr. Speaker, I have also spoken with the Minister of Interior, who has spoken with his IGP, and I've spoken with the Minister of Defense, and all of them give their assurance
as a representative of the people, I contacted the NADMO to expedite their investigation to establish the cause of the fires and bring to book if it was deliberate or deliberately orchestrated by an individual. However, Mr. Speaker, preliminary reports indicate that the fire was largely caused by bush fires. A thorough understanding of the underlying factors will be crucial in formulating and implementing decisive preventive measures. Mr. Speaker, as I address the House, it is estimated that over 200 farmers have been severely affected by this devastating catastrophic fire. Furthermore, preliminary assessment indicates that more than 30 barns containing over 198,900 yams and 100 bags of cereals have been completely destroyed. When translated into financial terms, this is loss of hundreds of Ghana cedis. Underscoring this extensive damage and economic hardship inflicted by these unfortunate bush fires. Mr. Speaker, the magnitude of this catastrophe cannot be overstated. It is not merely the loss of crops and food supplies that we mourn, but the destruction of livelihood, aspiration, and financial stability for hundreds of families. Many of these farmers had secured loans to finance their cultivations, anticipating a harvest that will sustain them in the months ahead. Now they are burdened with crippling debts and no means of recovery. Furthermore, the yam sets intended for the next planting season has been completely destroyed, jeopardizing the future agricultural cycle. Local markets, which depend on these farms' produce for trade and sustenance, are already experiencing severe disruption. If urgent and decisive action is not taken, the economic repercussions will escalate, deepening the hardship faced by my constituents and threatening the borders of food security of our region. Mr. Speaker, it is also worth mentioning that the food shortage resulting from this disaster will extend beyond my constituency. Many regions rely on the yam produced in Pandai, which is widely recognized for its yam production. This loss coming in the wake of adverse effect of last year's drought will have a cascading impact across the supply food chain, potentially driving up the price of yam and cereals and exacerbating economic hardship for a broader segment of the population. Mr. Speaker, this crisis demands immediate and decisive intervention. In the light of the severe impact on lives, livelihood, and food security, I make the following urgent appeal. 1. Emergency relief and humanitarian aid. I call upon the government, the National Disaster Management Organization, our development partners, and other humanitarian organizations to act swiftly in providing immediate relief to the affected farmers. This should include essential foods, supplies, financial assistance to support affected households in regaining stability. 2. Establishment of an agricultural disaster fund. I take this opportunity to appeal to the government to establish an agricultural disaster fund and dedicate financial mechanism designed to provide timely and targeted support to the farmers affected by natural disasters, such as the devastating fires that has impacted the 5 communities in the Pandai district. These funds will serve as a critical safety net, enabling affected farmers to recover, rebuild their livelihood, and ensure the sustainability of agricultural production in the disaster-prone areas. 3. Enhance fire prevention and response measures. This incident underscores the urgent need for strengthening the fire prevention and response mechanism in the agricultural zone. I urge the government to invest in early warning systems and enhance community education on fire safety and response strategy. Furthermore, agriculture and fire service agents should extend farming communities regularly to perform guidance to provide guidance on fire prevention and management. 4, compensations and insurance for farmers. It is imperative that we establish a robust agricultural insurance scheme to protect farmers from unforeseen disasters of this nature. I urge the government to develop a compensation framework that will provide financial relief to affected farmers, thereby preventing economic collapse in agricultural communities when such disasters occur. Mr. Speaker, this heartbreaking incident is more than just a tragedy. It is a wake-up call for our nation. If we fail to take decisive actions now, we risk subjecting thousands of citizens to prolonged hardship with further endangering our agricultural economy. We must confront these challenges with urgency and unwavering commitment, ensuring that our farmers who dedicate their lives to feeding the nation are not left without support they desperately need. As a rep of the people of Pandai, I stand in an unwavering solidarity with every farmer, every family, every individual affected by this disaster. I assure them that I will continue to advocate for their cause until concrete solutions and meaningful reliefs are provided. Mr. Speaker, urgent action is needed to mitigate the effect of this disaster and ensure that affected farmers and their communities can recover and rebuild. I trust that this Honorable House will give due consideration to this appeal and support measures that will safeguard the livelihood of our hardworking farmers. Let us all as leaders, policymakers, and a nation unite to transform this moment of loss into an opportunity for resilience and reform. The future of our farmers and our national food security depends on our action we take today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Honourable members, that is the statement. Honourable Joseph Kuma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Honorable Matthew Nyindam, for the statement. Mr. Speaker, the reoccurrence of fire, which has become perennial, so year in, year on, we've been discussing these things without solution. I remember my 3rd week in Parliament when we used to sit at the pavilion there. Honorable Bole Bamboy did a statement that year. That was the 8th Parliament. Honorable Bole Bamboy did a statement on bushfires, the devastating nature of bushfires, and its economic effect on our lives and farmers. The contribution that year was, can't we engage the fire service, or as a nation, we agree on early burning, because no matter what we do, the bushfires will follow us. Mr. Speaker, as I'm talking to you today, let me sympathize with the people of Pandai. And I know for 5 communities to be raised down in Pandai means a lot for the nation, as the maker of the statement said. I know how hardworking they are. Majority of the yams we see at Konkumba Market, Kintampo Market, and all over are from some of those places. Mr. Speaker, as a nation, if we don't take concrete steps to accept a particular policy, to come together and say, look, let's accept early burning. By early burning, I means when the bushes are becoming yellowish. We don't wait till they become very dry, so that the National Fire Service, through the Fire Volunteer Program, will monitor the burning gradually. Mr. Speaker, as I'm talking to you, Kintampo North, 2 houses and not less than 5 farms have been burnt. A family left their home to Kentampo Market at Congo in the Kunsu area. By the time they returned, the fire started from far, got to their home, burnt everything down. The school children cannot even get anything to change. It is a perennial problem. Should we continue to do statements and sit down? On my own, what I've done is that these days, annually, my common fund, I buy a motorbike as part of Farmers' Day award to the fire service people to use for fire volunteer. I think if we all emulate this, but they can't succeed if we don't make it a policy and do a national dialogue on it, that at least we should accept early burning as a nation, because no matter what we do, the bushes will be burnt. If you leave them, you have left petrol in the system. Let a driver smoke or anybody passerby smoke.
Honourable member, conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I plead that if you give direction to this proposal, that we do a national dialogue on early burning. I'm grateful.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. And let me use this opportunity to sympathize with the people of Pandai and also the maker of the statement. It is often said that fire is a bad master and a good servant. And in the month of January up to now, we've experienced a lot of fire or devastating fires across the country. We've experienced some in, Cantamanto, and we've seen other markets burning. What surprises me is that, if not anything, we often know that in January, we experience the dry seasons. So sometimes when you hear such statements, what comes to mind is that what makes people go burning bushes in the month of January when we are experiencing the dry seasons? But be it as it may, I would not like to belabor this house with the economic effect of such disasters. And I'll use this opportunity to pray for this house and also ask the disaster management bodies in this country to go in assistance of these farmers. Having said that, in public safety management, there are certain things that you do have control over, and there are others that you do not necessarily have any control over. So instead of we frequently asking NADMO and other disaster management committees to oftentimes come in aid of such disaster management victims, I would rather ask that NADMO and such institutions go into research-based institutions where they will know when and how these issues happen and come to the rescue of the people. As mentioned by previous speakers already, these are perennial events that we keep experiencing them. So for instance, we've been experiencing perennial flooding events in this nation. And we've been seeing these perennial disasters almost every year. It has even come to our attention that there was a year, or there was a particular year, where a foreigner had to stake lotto that he can bet that in that particular year, Accra was going to flood. So that being said, it is known to us the flood-prone areas. What prevents NADMO from researching and knowing that this year, these areas are meant to be flooded? And by putting in place preventive measures so that these perennial disasters do not happen. Because when they do happen, we happen to spend a lot of resources in putting back things where they are supposed to be. In the same way, I would ask that NADMO and other disaster management bodies should actually help in educating people in such dry areas, and also to encourage them that in such dry seasons, they do not go into burning the bushes and putting in place or engaging themselves in activities that will lead to such fire rates. Mr. Speaker, thank you for such an opportunity, and I pray that we'll go into the assistance of these victims. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Honorable Mahama Shaib.
Speaker, let me thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the statement ably made by my good friend from Kandai. I think this statement could not have been made at a better time. The dry season or the Harmattan season is here with us again, and it comes in its wake. Very devastating consequences. Indeed, it is a season that is natural, and we ought to prepare for the season. Every year, we come to lament over the effects of bushfires. But every year, we will still encounter this same problem. Growing up in the 80s, Speaker, this country experienced a very devastating dry season that swept across the entire Savannah woodland and left in its wake destruction of all farms. Indeed, there was a major drought and food shortages, and the worst affected were secondary schools. I remember we scavenged and gleaned through nearby communities and farms just to get some corn to roast and chew as students. That is the effect of the Harmattan and the dry season. We need to take a cue. We need to prefer solutions to it. But that has to do with attitude. Attitude in the sense that farmers will normally set fire when they go to farm. Education to farmers is actually very, very critical. Indeed, the season is such that the least touch, you have a widespread effect, and it cuts across the entire northern Savannah ecological zone. And that spans right from Kintampo through to the upper east and west regions. Speaker, we need to take pragmatic efforts in educating farmers and then the youth. Cigarette smokers, I know the law is against it in the public places, but at least people still have it. Anything that has to do with fire, preventing it is the best cure. Speaker, for farmers who have lost their property, I mean, you can imagine a whole farming season. Speaker, a farmer has put in a great deal of industry in coming out with his farm produce. Then one fine morning or evening, fire guards and takes everything off the farmer. It is a great statement that you have made. It should awaken our consciousness, and we must make an effort to get civil society organizations and other well-meaning institutions to up the education of bushfires. Indeed, when we prevent it, we will stop these perennial statements that we make regarding bushfires. The Speaker, let me thank the maker of the statement one more time and pray and hope that we'll come out with solutions to curb the menace. I thank you so very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Yes, Honorable Member.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to comment on the statement by Honorable Nyinda, especially on insurance for farmers who are victims of such disasters. Mr. Speaker, the African Risk Capacity, which is an initiative of African Union on insurance for farmers involved in disasters, was established. And Mr. Speaker, Ghana was the first West African country to apply and also do all customizations and was given a certificate of good standing. Mr. Speaker, as I speak now, Ghana has paid a premium of $1 million. And last year, there was a drought in the 5 northern regions. The Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Finance applied for some benefit for the farmers. So I want to take this opportunity to appeal to the government through the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Interior to follow it up so that they can get some benefit for such farmers who are involved in such disasters. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. Now, leadership. Minority leadership. Yes, honorable member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we all thank the maker of the statement for such a brilliant piece. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, we would like to tell him to send to his constituents that Ghana would definitely stand behind them for them to be able to recover. Mr. Speaker, my biggest challenge is that every time we come to this chamber about bushfires and flood, it seems that it has become an annual ritual without any solutions to them. In 1983, when the fires came, my grandmother's farm in Anyuankwanta completely got destroyed. So the hardships were everywhere. I know that my former boss, Kofi Ada, rice farm got burnt. Recently, just after the election, the minister for Savannah's rice farm also got burnt. So it shows that there's something amiss about these fires that keeps coming to our doorsteps. But unfortunately, it seems that when you sometimes also advise Ghanaians, they get offended. Because now that the fires are coming, we are all talking about insurances, government support, and the rest. But we also know that there are certain basic things that farmers can also do as buffers to make sure that the fires don't spread from one farm to the other. They won't do it. And then it becomes a problem. And then when people advise them, they become the target. How many times can we as a country continue to throw our money into the dustbin through bushfires or floods? I remember one day there was some floods in my area. And I'd advise those who were staying in flood-prone areas to always have a plan B. It became a major national topic. So I believe that these things cannot continue to be an annual ritual that will come to this house to only come and complain. We should prevent them in the first place. And I believe that the education of our farmers is key. The socialization of our farmers is key. If we don't continue to make prevention a part of our attitude, Mr. Speaker, this country will continue to wallow in poverty, especially in these areas. Because we all know that farming communities are one of the poverty-struck areas in our country. Because first and foremost, the farm business itself is not generating the incomes we expect it to generate for them. And therefore, if fires become another set of problems that is going to devastate or squander their produce, then naturally, we cannot eradicate poverty in our midst. So I believe that, like all the speakers have said, prevention is key. And our farmers, as part of their practices, should ensure they put in measures that will prevent the fires from coming in the first place, and two, from spreading. As for the fire service, I tell you, if they are big farms, it's definitely going to be difficult to quench it. And now that we are in the dry season, God be our help. But prevention is always better than cure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to add my voice to the matter.
Yes, majority. Majority leadership.
The honourable member will take the place of the majority leadership.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity. And let me thank the leadership for yielding to me to make some remarks about this good statement that was delivered by my brother from Pandai. Mr. Speaker, 1983 is still fresh in our minds. 42 years ago, the devastation that we suffered as a country, many farmers are yet to recover. And I can say if you go to a place like the Afram Plains, the effect of the bushfires in 1983 has left an indelible mark to the point that cocoa farms that were destroyed at the time have never been able to be reconstructed again. A decade later, in 1992, the Fourth Republic started. 32 years down the line, Mr. Speaker, we are still in the chamber, lamenting of the effect of bushfires. But we all know there are best practices around the world. And I can talk about a few of them within Ghana. If you go to the Mole National Park, there is something we call controlled burning. My brother from Kintampo North talked about early burning. We call it controlled burning. And controlled burning normally is done around November, when the grass are not too dry, they are not too combustible. But if you wait until January, February, where the grasses are so dry and so combustible, when you find fire burning, the capacity of any group of people or the capacity of any national institution like the Ghana National Fire Service to fight that fire becomes limited. Mr. Speaker, we all know climate change is a reality. The drought in 2024 will tell us that going forward, we need to be upping our game in understanding the impact of climate change, vis-a-vis the fact that dry season will come early and the country will be drier than before. So when you find bushfires destroying farms, it is telling us that for over 42 years, we are either not learning or we know what to do, but now we are not willing to do it. We know what to do and we are not doing it, and yet we are repeatedly complaining about the impact of bushfires. Mr. Speaker, the people of Pandai, I know it is just a statement talking about the people of Pandai, but many parts of this country, particularly in northern Ghana, bushfires are destroying farms. Bushfires are destroying properties. And all we have to do as a country is to come together to talk about the national resilience in fighting disasters. It is not just bushfires. There are several disasters that befall this country and it exposes our weakness. Mr. Speaker, the very good recommendations made by my brother from Pandai should be looked at, and let's come together as a country, bring in experts for us to craft a strategy to ensure that in 2026, when bushfires are coming again, Ghana as a country will be prepared to meet the challenge and save our farmers, save our properties, and save a national disgrace. With these few words, Mr. Speaker, I am so grateful, and I thank the maker of the speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Honourable Member, the last statement for the day is in the name of Honourable Adam Agbana. Before then, I will give the floor to Honourable Bajira.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I come under Order 285.1, which says that each committee to which a matter is referred shall report to the House before the end of each session of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, 31st of last month, the Right Honourable Speaker referred a matter to a special committee, where that special committee is to conduct investigation, a full-scale investigation into the event which occurred at the public hearing of the Appointments Committee on Thursday, 30th and Friday, 31st of January. Mr. Speaker, the committee was given 10 days to present its findings and its report. And Mr. Speaker, the committee requested for additional 2 days, which ended today. And so, Mr. Speaker, your committee has not been able to finish its work we need further additional 1 week. And so we want to request from Mr. Speaker to give us additional 1 week, that next Thursday, your committee will conclude its work and present its report to this House. With the leave of Mr. Speaker, we plead that you give us additional 1 week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I am inclined to indulge you, but in order not to be taking the dates in pieces, when do you think you can conclusively bring
Mr.
the
Speaker,
reports?
next week, Thursday, your report will be ready and presented to this House. Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, accordingly, the time within which the committee is supposed to present the report is accordingly extended to next week, Thursday. Thank you. Honorable Eric Adam Agbana, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to make my maiden formal statement since joining this House about a month ago. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to draw the attention of this august House to the dire state of Ghana's rent regime, a system that has become a major source of frustration and hardship for millions of Ghanaians, particularly the youth, low-income earners, and vulnerable groups. The cost of rent in Ghana is alarmingly high, access to affordable housing is limited, and the regulatory framework governing rent payments is largely ineffective. These challenges demand urgent and bold interventions if we are to provide decent living conditions for our people. Mr. Speaker, it is not surprising that when I conducted a survey on a social media platform called X, formerly Twitter, the rent regime was identified by most Ghanaians as their #1 challenge in the country. It is therefore imperative that we act with urgency, discuss this challenge, and prefer sustainable solutions. Mr. Speaker, let me begin by highlighting the challenges associated with Ghana's rent regime. Mr. Speaker, the first one is the exorbitant rent cost. In major cities, particularly Accra, Kumasi, Ho, Tema, and Takrady, rent prices are skyrocketing beyond the reach of the ordinary Ghanaian. Some landlords unilaterally increase rent without justification, and tenants who cannot afford the new rent rates are evicted in undignified manner. This places an unbearable financial burden on tenants. Mr. Speaker, Ghana faces a housing deficit of over 2 million units, with demand far exceeding supply. The lack of affordable housing forces many citizens into overcrowded and substandard living conditions. Mr. Speaker, weak enforcement of rent laws. While the law stipulates that landlords should not demand more than 6 months' rent in advance, enforcement is virtually non-existent. It is common for landlords to demand 2 to 3 years rent advance, in clear violation of the Rent Act 1963, Act 220. Many tenants are forced to comply with these arbitrary demands due to the power imbalance between landlords and tenants. Mr. Speaker, it is crucial that we revisit the rent bill, which was laid before Parliament in March 2023. This should serve as a wake-up call to urgently address the rent crisis facing the people of Ghana. This is important because President Mahama also promised same in the run-up to the 2024 general elections. Mr. Speaker, unregulated and exploitative rental market. The absence of clear rent control system has allowed landlords to charge arbitrary rates, revise rents without justification, and unfairly evict clients or tenants. Mr. Speaker, the causes of the crisis. Mr. Speaker, ineffective rent control system limited access to mortgage, uncoordinated government housing policies, and the high cost of building materials have been identified as some of the causes of the crisis in the rent regime that we currently face. Recommendations and policy proposals for urgent action. Mr. Speaker, immediate review and enforcement of the Rent Act, as outlined under Section 4.2.6 of the NDC's Resetting Ghana 2024 Manifesto. The government must review the Rent Act to introduce standardization in residential housing and enforce quality control in the built environment. Mr. Speaker, restructuring of the Rent Department into a Ghana Rent Authority to resource and give the necessary support to ensure that the interests of both tenants and landlords are balanced. Mr. Speaker, the establishment of a national rent assistance scheme. Again, this is one of the solutions outlined in the NDC's 2024 manifesto, and it is important to hold the government accountable to that. The state must support low-income earners by providing a rent advance loan scheme to enable them to afford decent housing without struggling to pay lump sums upfront. Mr. Speaker, imagine the plight of a young graduate from Penny Tamekope posted to DVLA head office in Accra for her national service. How can she raise, on the average, 36,000 Ghana cedis to pay a rent advance for 2 years for a single room that costs about 1,500 Ghana cedis per month, when her compulsory national service allowance is only 715 Ghana cedis per month, which is rarely paid early? Mr. Speaker, we need massive investment in affordable housing, and the government must collaborate with the private sector to build affordable housing units across the country, particularly in urban centers where rent is most expensive. This will significantly reduce the housing deficit. Mr. Speaker, it is also important that a new rent pricing framework is introduced to prevent landlords from arbitrarily increasing rent. Mr. Speaker, tax incentives for affordable housing. Developers who invest in affordable rental units should be granted tax incentives to encourage more housing projects. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the current rent situation in Ghana is unsustainable. It is an issue of national urgency that demands immediate and bold interventions. The citizens of this country deserve to live in dignity, and as leaders, it is our responsibility to ensure that housing, a basic necessity, is accessible and affordable for all. I therefore humbly call on this honorable House to act now and protect the ordinary Ghanaian from the burden of excessive rent costs. Mr. Speaker, once again, I thank you for the opportunity to make this statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will give the floor to Honorable Former Minister for Roads and Transport.
Thank you.
Roads and Highways.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important statement. And I want to commend my esteemed colleague for raising this issue of rent and its associated problems. Mr. Speaker, rent is a very important area that, as a country, we must all focus on and make sure that we provide shelter, especially for low-income Ghanaians. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the Rent Act, which was passed about 60 years ago, has outlived its usefulness. In fact, as a result of urbanization, population growth, and the huge housing deficit, my colleague mentioned that it's 2 million. In fact, it has moved down to 1.8 million. but it's still huge, Mr. Speaker. As a result, it has made the Rent Act and its implementation difficult. In fact, as housing minister, I've come to this house to answer a lot of questions on the Rent Act. And many of the issues that my colleague raised have been answered in the proposal that I brought to Parliament. In fact, he did mention that in March 2003, a review of the Rent Act was brought to this August House. It has delayed unnecessarily, and I think when it comes to revision of acts and legislation, it is the responsibility of Parliament, as was espoused by Honorable Speaker Abambabi. Is currently, I understand, at the ministry, and we call on the ministry to, as a matter of urgency, to bring back the rent bill so that Parliament, which is the body responsible for legislation, can do its job in shaping and bringing into place a new Rent Act that will address many of the issues that the member raised. In fact, he mentioned the need to move Rent Act department into an authority. The institutional aspect of the bill is highly recognized in the bill, and I expect that when it comes back, we will look at it thoroughly. The member also made a proposal for the introduction of rental advance scheme, assistant advance scheme. It will interest you to know that this is something that was started under the Akufo-Addo Bawumia administration. In fact, it was launched and it's been piloted in 6 regions. As we speak, I don't have the right figure available, but close to 3,000 beneficiaries have benefited so far from the rental assistance scheme. And in fact, during the vetting of the new minister, I had the opportunity to ask him what is it that he's going to do to upscale it. He said that he's going to speak to private institutions to raise capital to support it. That I think is a good idea. So once again, Mr. Speaker, I want to commend my colleague for bringing this issue up and add that it is a very important issue that Parliament must take particular interest and get the Ministry of Works and Housing and Water Resources to bring back the rent bill so that Parliament can do justice to it. With these few words, Mr. Speaker, I want to once again thank the maker of the statement for this insightful contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Sosu.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very, very timely statement presented by our brother, Honorable Edem Agbana, on the challenges of rent in this country today. Mr. Speaker, indeed, when you look at paragraph 9 of the statement, our brother reiterated that unregulated and exploitative rental market, the absence of clear rent control systems has allowed for arbitrariness in the regime. Now, the regime now belongs to the strong, the powerful, the worthy, to the detriment of the most vulnerable. And Mr. Speaker, it is on this account that I sincerely support the call by one of the contributors that we need to take urgent steps to review our Rent Act. We need to take urgent steps to review our Rent Act. Mr. Speaker, the current rent regime and then the rent relationship between landlords and tenants is so inequitable that even as members of Parliament, you will agree with me that one of the biggest challenges in our offices today is rent support. Mr. Speaker, if you come to my office in Medina, for example,
Even this morning before I left the office, there were people in the office asking for rent support. Many people have been unlawfully evicted from their homes. So the issue of rent is a very serious one. Mr. Speaker, I believe that we must slowly but surely move away from this regime where every time you need some advance before you can have access to a rent. We can have regimes, as in other best practices, people could pay monthly, or it's so flexible for people to determine whether they can pay every 2 months or they can pay every 3 months. But this regime where you need a rent advance of 1 year or 2 years, and some of the rents are now dollarized, Mr. Speaker. If you don't have dollar, you can't even get rent in parts of Greater Accra region. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a very serious one. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind us of one of the major goals of our Constitution, which is enshrined in Article 17. Mr. Speaker, Article 17 is titled Social Objectives of our Constitution. And it says that the state shall endeavor, Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will say the state shall endeavor to secure and protect a social order founded on the ideals and principles of freedom, equality, justice, probity, and accountability as enshrined in Chapter 5 of this Constitution. And in particular, the state shall direct its policies towards ensuring that every citizen has equality of rights, obligations, and opportunities before the law. Mr. Speaker, as we speak now, if you're in Ghana and you are poor, you don't have equal opportunities when it comes to rent issues. Mr. Speaker, if you're in Ghana and you've just lost your job, you don't have any opportunity when it comes to rent. So, Mr. Speaker, I sincerely pray that, Mr. Speaker, you would order that this statement be referred to appropriate committee so that Parliament will do follow-up on this matter to ensure that the minister brings back the Rent Act into this house for us to amend same to secure equal opportunities for all, particularly the most vulnerable and the poor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the statement.
Thank you, Honorable Asamoah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let us appreciate the maker of the statement, Honorable Eric Edem Agbanya, Member of Parliament for the good people of K2 North. Mr. Speaker, if it hadn't been the intervention of the MPP government bringing in free secondary education, one of the major issues that members of Parliament were faced with were two: support for tuition and support for rent. I'm happy to say that that of tuition has been taken away, and one of the major problems we are being faced now is rent support.
Honorable Asamoah, before the introduction of the free senior high school, were students paying tuition fee at secondary level?
Mr. Speaker, that support was
I always say that in contributing to statement, you need to be guided by the standing order.
Yes.
And we must be factual.
Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to generate a debate, but I want to please allow, I just want to express the fact that one of the major issues that we have to deal with is rent support from our constituents. It's not because they want to put that pressure on members of Parliament. But, Mr. Speaker, if we are to look at what the maker of the statement spoke about under recommendation, that is the 1,500 Ghana cedis averagely per a month to be paid by national service personnel that are likely to be paid 700 Ghana cedis doesn't align. So, Mr. Speaker, in our quest and effort to solve this issue, I believe working on the Rent Act alone might not suffice. But in addition, we have to have measures that can help improve on our credit system. Mr. Speaker, if property owners are supposed to give out their rooms for rent, they also want to be assured that they are going to get paid at the end of the month. So in addition to support our system, it will be good that what the previous government started to work on, which is the establishment of a good credit score system, so that property owners will be assured to give their rooms for rent in order not to ask for people to pay 2 or 3 years advance so that they can be assured of their payment. Mr. Speaker, in addition to this, I believe that we may have to review how much we also do pay our national service personnel who are also supporting our workload. If you look at countries that are working on dual system, that national service is also a time that one has to learn to be part of the workforce. And it shouldn't be a time of punishment to our national service personnel. 1 year is quite a long time. And I believe if government can also take steps to review how much we pay our national service personnel, because if they are to pay 1,500 a month, 1,500 Ghana cedis a month, that means they will be in arrears every month to be able to survive, not to talk about their transportation and feeding. So whilst we are taking steps to look at rent issues, Mr. Speaker, my advice is that government should, as a matter of agency, review how much we are paying national service personnel to support them as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this particular statement. And I want to thank the maker of the statement. That the Speaker, this issue has come up, I think, just about the right time. We all know the cost of rent in this country and the housing deficit that we have in this country. That the Speaker, when you travel to most of our communities, essential service providers like teachers and nurses are reluctant to even accept posting to these communities because when they get in there, to even get a place to rent so they can wake up in the morning and go to work in itself is a problem. Apart from the cost in the cities, as the maker of the statement has enumerated, in the villages, the houses are simply not available. And so somebody, for example, is posted to a place like Likpebala in my constituency to go and teach, or to go and serve as a health practitioner. The fellow has to stay in Howe, pick a motor in the morning before he gets to work. Mr. Speaker, oftentimes when you see them in the morning, they look like people coming from maybe a Galante pit as a result of the nature of the road. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we say we are building affordable houses, and the focus and the concentration is always in the towns and the cities, and no attention is paid to the rural areas, what it will create eventually is that everybody will want to move to the cities and towns where they believe they can get proper accommodation and housing for their families. And so whilst we make effort to provide affordable housing, Mr. Speaker, it will be important that we pay some attention to the villages. Mr. Speaker, the next issue I want to raise has to do with the cost of the so-called affordable houses that we've even built in Accra. Mr. Speaker, go and find out today how much they are renting these same affordable houses. So you have an institution like SNIT that will use workers' money to build an apartment, like the dental SNIT housing. Then people who are well placed in society will go and buy these houses from SNIT. And then they will now go and rent it for the poor people who cannot raise money to buy it. I think that it is not a healthy practice that we use state resources to build houses that are supposed to go for individuals who don't have money, and yet we sell it to the people who have money, and then now go and rent it to the ordinary people. Mr. Speaker, it's a practice that we need to check. One of the reasons why, Mr. Speaker, I believe that houses are becoming very expensive in this country is the cost of building materials. Mr. Speaker, today a ton of iron rod is not a joke. And I've always been citing an example that my grandfather who gave birth to my father, I didn't see him. By a house he built in my village
without any iron rod, without any cement. They just use clay. That house is still there to date. Is there a way we can develop technology that we can build houses that are cheap and affordable and really affordable, that ordinary people can go in there and go and rent? And it's something that we need to do, to invest in some technology, how we can modify this same clay that we have here, either into bricks and use to put our houses, and stop solely depending on these iron rods, this cement, and the rest. Mr. Speaker, one other thing that is giving us a problem are these agents who go and contract these houses and they serve as middlemen. They will collect some percentage of the money from the tenant. They will collect a percentage from the one who is also renting the house. Meanwhile, these people don't pay any taxes to the state. Can we come out with either a law that will say that if you have a house and you want to rent the house, send it to a district assembly. We have young people out there who now determine, the assembly will determine how much the house must go for. So that the landlord who is taking the money from the tenants also pays some taxes to the state, instead of these middlemen who only make money from both the tenants and the landlord and don't contribute anything to the state. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think that one of the reasons why we are not able to enforce the law at 1963 at 20 is the fact that majority of the people who own these houses, who are renting out, themselves are a beneficiary. And so now once they implement the law strictly, they will not benefit. How many poor people have been in houses in this country? It is the same rich people who have been in the houses. The same people are supposed to enforce the law. They are the landlords. And so deliberately, what is glossing over it, that let the status quo remain. The young man comes out of the university. He gets an appointment, let's take SNIT, and he's posted to Accra. And before he can start work, he has to go and take a loan to go and rent a house. Now, Mr. Speaker, by the time he finishes paying for the 2 years rent, the rent is due again. He has to go and look for another money. So from the word go, you are in debt till you go to pension. I don't think this is healthy. And I'm not surprised these days, every young person who gets any form of employment, the first thing they're thinking about, how do I get money to buy my own land? How do I get money to start putting up my own houses? And we know money injected in building is not money you can easily get back. Meanwhile, they could have used that money to other sectors of investment that can give them some money. And so, Mr. Speaker, I sincerely want to thank the maker of the statement and call on this House to take some measures to make sure that rent becomes really affordable, that we are able to provide houses, especially in the rural community, for the citizens of our country. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, leadership. Honourable members, I said leadership because
sorry, Mr. Speaker,
I want to take the statement of Honourable Befi. So there will be one more statement to be taken for the day.
Very well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to cede my opportunity to.
Please do. Honourable member, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the statement, well-researched and ably made by my colleague, Honorable Adam. Mr. Speaker, I believe the high rent rates we see in this country is as a result of our high deficit in our housing units. As the Speaker of the statement said, with over 2 million deficits in housing units, it's no surprising that we find a lot of young women and men who have moved to the bigger cities for greener pastures on the streets. Mr. Speaker, these young men and women, mostly I'm concerned about the women who are very innocent and vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine those young women on the streets with men who are very active, men who sometimes come from the woods with smoke all over them, men who are seen at the blue kiosks, men who are on tramadol? I'm worried about events of the night, Mr. Speaker. Our young ladies are vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, permit me to share an experience I had over the weekend. Over the weekend, I had to visit some constituents of mine who have graciously enjoyed free SHS and are currently in Accra to pursue their, to pursue their first degree. Mr. Speaker, when I visited them in Medina, as many as 6 of them were in one room. Not only was this disheartening, Mr. Speaker, but my fear was the fact that if these young students are left in this condition for a prolonged period of time, they will be exposed to all sorts of unhealthy conditions. And it would also have an adverse impact on their studies. Mr. Speaker, no student should be exposed to these dilapidated, unsanitary, unhealthy conditions. Mr. Speaker, I had to step in and mitigate the situation by making sure that they are rehoused and put in pairs. Mr. Speaker, aside these, when people are lucky enough not to find themselves on the street, you find that they are in informal settlements. These informal settlements lack basic amenities like sanitation, water, and electricity. Mr. Speaker, the rent situation is very dire and needs to be looked at. I therefore propose that we really look at our rent control mechanism. Mr. Speaker, the truth of the matter is affordable housing is simply not affordable. It is simply not affordable. And most often than not, when these people have exhausted their 2-year rent, they find themselves having to go back to an increase in the next rent advance. Mr. Speaker, these rent increments are not even proportional to any improvement in the housing conditions. It is really terrible and has to be addressed. Mr. Speaker, I therefore will conclude by proposing that we look at a district-based rent mechanism, whereby we would have all tenants and landlords present a rent agreement that will be scrutinized, approved, and then deposited. This will ensure compliance and make the average Ghanaian who find themselves in the low income brackets, have access to good housing units. I will also propose that we move I wouldn't say move away from affordable housing, but we look at social housing schemes, which will bridge this gap. Mr. Speaker, I would like to end by commending the maker of the statement and saying that every Ghanaian deserves decent, affordable housing, and we should ensure as a house we look at this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You said students from your constituency are 6 in one room. Are they boarders or they students?
Sorry.
Are they boarders or they students?
Their first degree. They are in
Their
various
first
Accra
degree.
universities.
Very
Yes.
well. Very well. Yes, Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, please, I would like to yield to Honorable Gizela to conclude.
Honorable Gizela Tete, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if there's any assurance we can give this House and to Ghanaians, this is the time for us to give it. I thank the maker of the statement and for all those who have contributed. As they say, the saying goes, Infanti, Nyansa, any Ipa team. To wit, it's not one person who has all the ideas. And I always enjoy when we are able to discuss some pertinent issues that affect every single person in this House. Now, Mr. Speaker, the rental market has become a bit more sophisticated and a bit more varied. Sometimes when we discuss, we tend to limit to housing. But remember that there's also commercial rentals, which are shops and stores and others. And it has generally been an issue and a problem, and even that even goes to affect the business, the local business that goes on in this country. Now, the market is becoming more sophisticated. As you know, even Airbnbs are also part of the rental market. They would have been maybe in the category of hotels. People should sleep in hotels, but they choose to sleep in people's rented places. And so I just want to give the assurance to this House and to Ghanaians in general that the government of John Dramani Mahama, as he's resetting this country, he's resetting some of the programs and some of the policies that he has put in place. And this rental issue will be dealt with comprehensively. There must be a balance also. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. People invest. Some people consider these houses as an investment. And so they also feel that they must also get returns. And so there must be a fine balance between the supply, obviously, and the demand for it. And so my plea is that together, for the supply side, for those who have the luxury of renting, you should also bear in mind that much as they are trying to recoup their investments, they're also providing a service, and a social service at that, especially when we have issues with different groups, like my colleague just talked about, students renting. The hostels are also sometimes a bit exploitative, and yet there is not much that people are able to do. So I just need to give that assurance that we will see to these things. Myself, my minister, even just yesterday, we were discussing it. We intend to have a district housing scheme so that teachers and so on who are posted to these rural areas will be able to at least have decent accommodation. And not only teachers, but other government workers, nurses, and so on and so forth, and even the general public. Mr. Speaker, we have to move on as a country. We must progress. And it's my prayer that we all support the reset agenda to make that happen. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. It is true that the Rent Act needs to be reviewed. The bill was introduced, but was not passed into law. I believed if the law is passed, reviewing the Rent Act, most of these problems will be resolved. The Deputy Minister Designate is here. I will urge upon the Sector Minister to take a look at the bill and give it the due consideration so that we can really review the Rent Act and solve most of these problems. Members, let's take the last statement in the name of Michael Ocherebefi, MP for New Job and South, on strengthening Ghana's industrial sector and trade for sustainable economic growth. Honourable Member, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Right Honourable Speaker, I rise to speak on strengthening Ghana's industrial sector and trade for sustainable economic growth. We stand at a pivotal moment poised for economic transformation, yet facing significant challenges. This statement will evaluate Ghana's progress, identify obstacles, and propose concrete actions to strengthen our industrial sector and trade capabilities. Mr. Speaker, Ghana's industrial sector has demonstrated resilience, particularly amidst the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Initiatives such as One District, One Factory policy and the Ghana Automotive Development Policy have shown promise in fostering industrial growth and diversification. Indeed, for the first time in the history of Ghana, we have 7 vehicle assembly plants manufacturing about 14 brands of vehicles, whilst the 1D, 1F program, notwithstanding its challenges, has led to the establishment of new factories and expanded existing ones, thus creating 169 companies in operation. These and other industrial initiatives have created jobs and stimulated local production in various sectors, especially agro-processing.
According to the World Bank, the industrial sector's contribution to Ghana's GDP increased significantly from approximately 24.3% in 2016 to 33.0% in 2023. This growth high in job creation, especially in manufacturing and construction, export diversification, and value addition. It is also worthy of note that manufacturing value addition increased from $6 billion to $8.5 billion between 2016 and 2023. Ghana has seen notable improvement in its trade performance between 2016 and 2024, driven by several factors, including policy reforms, enhanced export diversification, and increased investment in key sectors. Ghana's total trade volume has experienced substantial growth. For example, total export rose from approximately 13.5 billion in 2016 to an estimated 20 billion by 2023. Imports also increased, but at a slower rate, leading to an overall positive balance in trade in certain years, particularly due to rising commodity prices on the global market. Mr. Speaker, cocoa, gold, and oil remains the cornerstone of Ghana's export economy. In addition to these traditional exports, Ghana has made considerable strides in diversifying its export. The trade in non-traditional export, such as cashew nuts, shea butter, and fruit, has seen growth. Non-traditional exports increased from about 2 billion in 2016 to 3 billion by 2023. Between 2016 and 2024, Ghana's trade performance has evidently improved, showcasing significant growth in exports across several key sectors. Continued investment in infrastructure and a focus on diversifying trade routes and products will be critical for maintaining this positive trajectory in the future. The government's strategic initiatives aimed at enhancing trade will be essential for further sustainable economic development. The Speaker, despite these positive indicators, several critical challenges hinder Ghana's industrial and trade sector. One, high electricity tariffs for manufacturers. High energy costs increase production expenses, making Ghanaian goods less competitive in both domestic and international markets. Addressing this requires diversification of energy sources, investment in renewable energy infrastructure, and potentially targeted subsidies for energy-intensive industries. Two, inadequate infrastructure, poor road networks, unreliable transportation, and limited access to reliable internet connectivity hinder efficient movement of goods and services. Strategic investment in infrastructure development is vital for improving logistical efficiency and attracting foreign direct investment. Point 4, access to capital. SMEs, the backbone of many economies, often lack access to affordable credit. Government initiatives such as loan guarantee schemes and support for microfinance institutions can be mitigated. Point 5, technological innovation and skilled labor. A lack of technological advancement and a shortage of skilled labor limits productivity and competitiveness. Investment in education and training programs, coupled with incentives for technological adoption, is paramount. Point 6, export diversification. Over-reliance on a few key exports renders Ghana vulnerable to price shocks. Value addition to new materials, exploration of new markets, and strategic partnerships to access global value chains are crucial for diversification. The Speaker, I propose these recommendations to help government to be able to boost trade and the export and the industrial sector. One, to enhance Ghana's industrial sector and trade, the following recommendations must be taken seriously. The first one is strengthen the 1D, 1F and automotive industrial sector. A comprehensive evaluation of these policies is needed to identify successful strategies and areas requiring improvement. Targeted support for high growth sectors coupled with streamlined bureaucratic processes will maximize their impact. Improve infrastructure. Invest in robust transportation networks, reliable power supply, and high-speed internet access to reduce operational costs and boost competitiveness. Enhance access to finance. We have to expand access to credit for SMEs through government-backed loans, microfinance institutions, and innovative financial instruments. We have to also promote technological innovations. There's the need for us to invest in education and training to build a skilled workforce and incentivize the adoption of technology in various industries. The last but not the least, leverage the African Continental Free Trade market. Actively participate in the African Continental Free Trade market. The African Continental Free Trade has come to stay, whether we believe it or not. And therefore, there's a need for us as a country to take advantage of this bloc. The African Continental Free Trade is now the biggest customs union in the whole of the world. And therefore, Ghana have to take serious advantage of this market to be able to boost intra-African trade and also to increase our export earnings. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, Ghana can build a more robust industrial sector, diversify its export, and foster sustainable economic growth for the benefits of all Ghanaians. I urge this August House to take serious interest in trade and industrial activities to help boost Ghana's intra-African trade systems and infrastructure to be able to earn more in the area of exports to help build a better Ghana. On this note, I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The floor is now open for comment. Yes, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. I rise to support a statement made by my colleague, Honorable Michael Kofi Befi. Mr. Speaker, a woman trade from Ghana face a lot of challenges using a Aflao border for trade. Mr. Speaker, from Akachi border to Tetekwashi roundabout, we have about 27 checkpoints on the route. This is an issue we need to address and to assure smooth trade at the border. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Yes, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I want to commend the maker of the statement. And my contribution has to do with improvement in industrialization. As we all know, last time a colleague made a statement here that we don't need any magician to work at the Bank of Ghana to reduce the pressure on the dollar. But all that we need to do is to increase productivity. If supply exceeds demand, the pressure on the dollar comes down. Mr. Speaker, it will surprise you to see a very big factory set up in my constituency. That is 1 hour drive from Accra. A jute sack factory that can produce over 600,000 bags of jute sack that has been left for the past 8 years. What are we doing about this? If Ghana Cocoa Board can import sacks with millions of dollars from India and Bangladesh, why can't we revamp this factory to produce sack for Ghana Cocoa Board? Mr. Speaker, I would urge the sector minister to take up and work on this factory. I'm talking about Adesso, not far from Accra. The investors are there. They are waiting to hear from us. And what can we do about this? On this note, I will want to thank the maker of the statement and also urge the House to take the necessary action for the factory that we call Kotoku factory at Adesso to be revamped for the youth to get something to do. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Honorable Samia.
Mr. Speaker, I like to also support and commend the maker of the statement in specific relation to our industrial sector and also how we can strengthen our trade sector. Right, Honorable Speaker, the previous colleague who just spoke and in contributing to the statement made by the Honorable MP for New Javan South, made mention of another worrying trend where you can have a factory that produces things that we can use in our country. But many a time you see government moving outside even the shores of our country to get the same thing and at an exorbitant price. Honorable Speaker, just less than 40 minutes from here, in my own constituency where Tetekwashi brought the cocoa pod from Fernando Po to plant that today Ghana is also highly regarded as a major cocoa producing country. President Kufuor started a chocolate processing factory. Unfortunately, before President Kufuor could end his tenure, the factory was at just about 70 to 75% completion. Up to today, it's been left there. But then when you see some of these factories coming up, and you have the existing that we sometimes expand to create jobs for our own people, we turn a blind eye on it. Honorable Speaker, I believe that for us to strengthen our trade sector and the industrial sector, there are some key things that must also come to play. One, the attitude of our people in reacting, producing, and also consuming what we also produce in Ghana becomes very critical. Many of the state-owned enterprises, and Mr. Speaker, I share a personal experience as well. During Christmas and Easter festivities, where many state-owned enterprises will prefer to buy foreign rice for even their staff than the locally produced rice. And all these things definitely will have rippling effect on even the currency of our country. Once again, let me also dwell on the attitude of our people when I also say it's critical in strengthening our industrial sector. Many members of parliament, for instance, have similar experiences of even this access to microcredit. Our own people, you support with this microcredit, and many members of parliament end up carrying the burden of paying the entire credit that they even help to secure, guarantee, or support constituents and people who may be in need. I believe that even though the foundation has been laid, let me commend the previous government for the 169 companies under the 1D1F, with the old, expanding the old companies and also the establishment of new ones. But I believe that these companies will eventually die off if we do not even consume what they are producing, if we do not take advantage of what they are even producing. And then also the taste developed by for foreign goods, right, Honorable Speaker, is something that I won't say you can compel somebody to just necessarily consume what we produce in Ghana. But I think we should also make it much more attractive for these companies that are also helping employ our people, helping develop this our country, also have the benefit of the things that they are producing to see them on these shelves. In the past, we've had several of these beverages. After 3-4 months, after a year, you do not even find them on the shelves again. I believe that the time has come, and the urgency of the time also requires that now all over the world, Right Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, many countries are now resorting to also looking inward in trying to raise revenue and support the growth of their industries. In conclusion, I would like to also appeal to you to use your good office to help my people in my constituency that the Tetekwashi chocolate factory that was started almost 20 years ago and up to today is been left in the bushes somewhere. And if we can have the Minister for Trade and the Agro-Business we can also have the people having the benefit of at least getting some employment opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Professor. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for catching my eye this time around. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, allow.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity, and let me thank the maker of the statement for making a very important contribution and bringing this subject matter to the floor. Industrialization is very important that we must embrace as a country. Indeed, that is supposed to be the future of the country, because if you mention most of these developed countries, they have reached where they are because of industrialization. We as a country are blessed with a lot of raw materials, but we tend to export most of these raw materials to other countries. They get them processed, and then we import them with a lot of hard currencies to be able to use as a country. Meanwhile, we have huge potential to be able to establish these, to be able to establish these industries to take care of these things. Let me mention that the challenges we face as a country in developing our industries has to do with technological know-how. We have a country where we have good brains, but we don't consciously train our people with the requisite technological know-how to be able to man our industry. The other challenge we have as a country is high cost of production. You have industries that are folding up because of high production. I remember a case where there was this company producing parts. Because of high cost of production, they had to fold up in this country. And they relocated in Egypt, where they were producing at relatively very low cost. The products, when they produce and bring the products to this country, they are able to sell it far lesser than the price they were selling in this country and still make profit. So which means that the cost of production is a matter that we have to look at as a country. The high tariff being paid by these industries is something that we have to look at. We are transiting into renewable energy. That is what we have to look at as a country. Let's see how we can introduce these renewable energy sources in our industries. And I'm sure when that is done, it can help to bring down cost of production and also reduce the burden on this our industries. The other issue
that we have to look at is the taxes. The taxes are so much on these industries. The cost of production is very high because we tax them so much. At the end of the day, they cannot even break even. And that is very worrisome. One thing that we also have to look at is to try and see how we can look at introduce these industries in our rural communities. I know the previous government tried to look at this 1D, 1F, but if you look at the way they tax some of these setups as industries, I think some of them were not qualified. There were some which were just could just be somebody's poultry farm. They name it as industry, and so we need to really look at if we are industrializing our districts or establishing industries in the districts. We really have to get serious and take serious measures to be able to establish this. So, Mr. Speaker, on my recommendation, I will urge us as a country to try and see how we can take advantage of the huge raw materials we have as a country and work towards introducing more industries. We have to also train more people with technological know-how to be able to let people stay and work in the industries, is to be able to find a way of reducing cost of production. And if we are able to do all these things, I believe strongly that we, as a country, can really take our industrialization more seriously and get to establish more industries to be able to accommodate the teething unemployment we have as a country. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity.
Very much. I give the floor to Honorable Samuel Abujinapo.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the statement ably made by the Honorable Michael Ochre-Befi, MP for New Joabin South. So, Speaker, on a very important subject, which is the industrial sector and trade for sustainable economic growth. Mr. Speaker, I think that the Honorable MP should be commended for bringing this very topical matter, and I should say, a very timely subject. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure this House has been following the trade war between the United States of America, China, Mexico, Canada, and the European Union, and the retaliatory slapping of import duties and tariffs on their respective imports. And this is why the whole area and sector of trade in our country, both domestic and international trade, is absolutely important. Mr. Speaker, I believe that when you take a cursory look at the statement made by the Honorable MP and the contributions made, I think the question of trade facilitation and trade promotion is absolutely important. The issue to do with infrastructure, such as our ports, Mr. Speaker, how competitive are our ports, the Tema Port, the Takoradi Port, as opposed to Lomé Port, and all of that. I think it's absolutely important that we pay attention to that. Mr. Speaker, the Boankra Inland Port, which was begun by the Akufo-Addo government and which is almost complete, to what extent are we going to complete it? To what extent are we going to operationalize it? And to what extent are we going to use that as a tool or a vehicle for trade facilitation and promotion? Mr. Speaker, when you go to Debra in the Savannah region of Ghana, there is another inland port which has been envisioned by the Akufo-Addo administration, which is meant that we're going to have goods transported from Tema Port, Debra, and Debra becoming the hub for transportation of goods from Savannah region to Burkina Faso, to Mali, to Niger, to Chad. To what extent are we going to, the new Minister for Trade and the new government is going to complete this project and make it as an anchor and use as an anchor for trade facilitation and trade promotion? Mr. Speaker, another area of significant importance is also the area of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. As you know, Mr. Speaker, Ghana is the headquarters for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has a mandate to promote intra-African trade and bring about a regional market for Africa.
And Ghana is hosting this secretariat. Ghana is leading the effort, Mr. Speaker, at ensuring that we have African integration when it comes to trade in Africa. I believe that Ghana should take advantage of this effort by the African Union to build a continental market. Mr. Speaker, the statistic is that intra-African trade is some 7% of all the trade that happens within Africa. And when you take the European Union, intra-European Union trade is above 70%. And the benefits that will accrue as a nation, if, for example, we are able to export our salt to places like Nigeria, where Nigeria, as we speak today, imports their salt far away from Brazil. And these are the areas we need to pay particular attention to. Mr. Speaker, we also need to look at import substitution. Import substitution is absolutely important because if we are able to promote import substitution, Mr. Speaker, and produce as much of our consumables here in Ghana and consume them here in Ghana and consume made in Ghana, Mr. Speaker, that is the only way we can retain Ghanaian wealth within Ghana. And that is how we can promote the private sector of Ghana, Mr. Speaker, and that is how we will not export our hard-earned currency, hard-earned foreign currency. And if I may say, Mr. Speaker, almost everything we consume in our country is mostly imported. And so import substitution is absolutely important. That is why the Akufo-Addo administration again brought about the one district, one factory. And I think it's particularly refreshing, Mr. Speaker, that the new government is also brought about agro-business as a component of the Ministry of Agriculture, as well as industry as a component of the Ministry of Trade. Agro-processing is key, particularly in the farming enclaves of our country, Afram Plain, Northern Ghana, and other parts of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by indicating that the statement which is being made by the Honorable Member of Parliament calls for a lot more thorough examination, because across the world, countries are now engaged in what is called protectionism, which is that countries want to protect their industries, they want to protect their private sector, they want to ensure that their countries only consume what they produce. At the same time, they want to export what they produce, the excess of what they produce, they want to export it out, and which are the two pillars of protectionism. I think it's about time that our country also begins to examine and interrogate how we in our country protection, where we produce here, we consume what we produce, and whatever we have in excess, we are able to export, beginning with the West African region of Africa and the continental economy of Africa, to ensure that the Ghanaian economy grows so we can have the sustainable economic growth the Honorable Member of Parliament is calling for. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, leadership. Minority Whip.
Speaker, let me first of all thank you for the admirable endurance shown today. If one counts the number of statements you have admitted, it is not ordinary, and I want to commend you for having endured all this while, and particularly commend my good friend, the Honorable former Deputy Minister for Trade, carrying the experience along. Speaker, let me try to veer off, not to repeat many of the good things that colleagues have observed, just to narrow my contribution in this area. It's not debatable, Speaker, that we have to depart from what the first president of this country, President Nkrumah, led, and get onto it and blaze a path where growth, industrial revolution will be private sector led. That model has to sink, and both sides of the divide will have to come to that conclusion that it is only a private sector led industrialization that can change the fortunes and change the narrative. Speaker, the state leading industrialization has failed. It's failed. And many of the industries that were built from independence had to be sold out to private entities. We can have another day to make that argument, but the point is that a private sector-led industrial growth is what can change the narrative and change the story. And for me, that should be the fulcrum of the discussion. We have something in our constitution called Chapter 6, Directive Principle of State Policy. And successive governments have a moral mandate and responsibility to continue what the previous government has started off. If it is the case that the previous government's policy of 1D, 1F, we may have our criticisms of its implementation, we may have our criticism of shortfalls, associated inherent shortfalls. If it is the case that indeed, and I took a casual look at the NDC's manifesto on industrialization. It is essentially not different from what the NPP stood for. It's essentially not different. Your manifesto says previous industrial move started by the NPP administration. You are going to continue with that. Speaker, let's come to that stage.
Honourable member, address me.
Yes, Speaker, I'm addressing you. Let's come to that stage of our development paradigm where we will say that let's jettison the shame, if there is any, and say that the LPP started 1D, 1F. It's built this number of industries. So we will have to continue with that. We continue the ones. I'm not here to tell you the number of industries we've built. I don't have the statistics. Probably the former minister can tell you. But I'm making a point that one day you will also not be in government. One day you'll be out. In fact, soon you'll be out. Soon you'll be out. Soon you'll be out.
Honorable Minority Whip, please be guided accordingly.
I stay on course. So let's continue a culture of continuity. That is what I'm speaking to. A culture of continuity is what we should look at. Speaker, Africa has the youngest population globally. And we know the incidental effect of this on industrial growth, incidental effect of population on the growth of the economy and the growth of a country. We are told Sub-Saharan Africa is projected to be the second fastest growing region globally after Asia. We are also told that now, unlike before when Nigeria was leading, seen as the biggest economy, South Africa now has the biggest economy, arguably the biggest economy. Something they are doing right in the area of manufacturing, something they are doing right in the area of mining. What is happening at Johannesburg? We have a lot of gold deposit in our country, but we are allowed politicking and name calling and tagging to drain our country. What is it about Johannesburg that we can't do? We can also do same or even better. Our policy of free zone concept, Speaker, is now not, for want of a better expression, not current. Free zone. Now, the experts are talking about economic zone. And not too far, Côte d'Ivoire here. Côte d'Ivoire is becoming more competitive. And we keep relying on our past glory. Côte d'Ivoire now is becoming more competitive in terms of investment destination than Ghana. What are they doing right? They've consistently been reviewing their policy. Their policy on free zone now, they've shifted down. That is what they call economic zone. So, Speaker, not to rehash the high point of my colleague's statement, I'm simply saying that, please, and I saw my good friend Adongo walking in. who I know will be named very soon by His Excellency the President. He will be named very soon. What we are saying, what we are saying is that there should be no shame. Let's sustain the 1D1F policy, regardless. That was started by the MPP, as well as MPP administration. And this is what can change the fortunes. Elsewhere, South Africa, when government changes, you see the previous government and the succeeding government exchanging notes. After all, what is it? It's about the welfare of our people. I believe strongly that when it comes to industrialization, we are better. The interrelations about raw material usage, market sources, the fact that sub-Saharan Africa, we are not trading amongst ourselves. These are basic matters that can be dealt with. But the problem is self-inflicted. The problem is self-inflicted. Let's go away or shift the paradigm and say that enough of the politicking. As long as there is something done which we consider as a productive and something we can continue on as a succeeding government, we should lay claim to it, own it, and say that it's a state project. Let's sustain it. And I think if we begin to change our attitude as politicians, as the political class, we will make a very good progress. We shouldn't be too worried about the number of factories that the NPP built. After all, they built some. We built a number of them. Improve upon them. Don't shy away from the 1D1F. Own it. See it as a state project. And then we can make the success that we are all desirous of seeing. Speaker, let me conclude by inviting you. And Speaker, I know you are very good at these consequential directives. Statements, a number of statements are made in this house. We purgate motions, we lament, and then we leave it there. Notwithstanding the fact that we haven't formed or fully constituted our committees. Speaker, I know you are very wise in such matters and you can guide us how to navigate. It's a very important statement that we can't just let go. Maybe pending the formation of the Committee on Trade. And it's also interesting to realize that His Excellency the President has decided to have the Ministry for Trade now recouched as the Ministry for Trade and Agribusiness. I commend His Excellency the President for that identity. But the effect of it must reflect practically, not just the name and the ID. And so, Speaker, I will invite you, if it finds favor with you, to make some appropriate consequential directives that I know by next week the committees will be fully constituted. They should take a look at this statement and see how we can draw on the trust of it and relate it properly for the betterment of our country. Speaker, let me commend the maker of the statement and thank you for the endurance. This number of statements you have admitted. I want to commend you highly, Speaker, for your endurance. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Majority.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me also thank the maker of the statement, the former Deputy Minister of Trade, for making this important statement. Mr. Speaker, I think there is no doubt in anybody's mind in this country that Ghana wants to industrialize. We want to become a manufacturing economy. There's no doubt. We want to do same, you want to do same. Where we have always got it wrong is actually the implementation and all the kind of names we give to the kind of industrialization that we want. But the simple fact is that we want Ghana to become a manufacturing economy. We want to add value to all the resources that we are endowed with so that we'll be able to make the shelf value of these things, longer and valuable. There's no question about that. Whether you want to do it through 1D, 1F, or whichever means you want to do it, Ghana must industrialize. That is the bottom line. We are in a continent where we don't do much business with ourselves. Intra-trade is about 3%. And we do business with the rest of the world. Even where we have created an African continental free trade, we are not taking advantage of it. We have not put in any preparation that shows to anyone that Ghana wants to improve trade with its own neighbors. These are the things, and my honorable brother was talking about continuity. I'm not quite sure whether we get to know about continuity when we go to opposition or when we are in government. Because Commander Sugar Factory was handed over to you 8 years ago. You forget about continuity. All of a sudden, we have remembered continuity. Ghana does not produce a grain, not even a grain of sugar. If you go to Uganda has about 20 factories, over 20 factories, sugar factories. We don't produce a single sugar in this country. Previous government put a previous government put up a Commander Sugar Factory. 8 years, the previous government had issue with it, bringing in people to come and take over the sugar factory. 8 years later, the factory is not working. Ghana still does not produce a grain of sugar. So I'm glad about continuity. And we will continue things that needs to be continued. 1D, 1F, for me, did not work. And that's not the argument here. And we have 24-hour economy. Yes, you don't want to hear that. But for the next 4 years, you hear about 24-hour economy. And that, for the situation that we are in at the moment, we believe that is the way to go. We need to be able to produce more. We are not producing more in this country. So 24-hour economy will enable us to triple what we are currently producing. It will enable us to get more people to work. Where one person works, then in the future, it will be 3 people working. If you don't want this, what do you really want? We talk unemployment is in the roof at the moment. We need to get our people working. Young people haven't got jobs to do. We need to create jobs for them. And not just for the fun of it, for us to be able to produce. The former minister for lands was talking about import substitution. What is import substitution? You need to be able to produce the things before you can substitute them. You cannot just come and pass a law that we are banning importation of this, we are banning importation of that, without having a replacement for what you are banning. That's what we have endured in the last few years, where we have people who are promoting banning of things we don't produce in this country. So when we start producing those things, then we can actually start stopping certain things from coming into the country. But if you don't produce them and you ban them, you're actually going to increase prices. We are talking about, the minister was also talking about, what is it called? What was he talking about? He was talking about basically looking at what the Americans are doing by being a protectionist, basically. You want to protect and you want to export. What do you really want to do? You want to protect your economy and not bring people in, but you want to export to somebody else. It's import and export. You export what you are good at and you import what you are not good at, so that you'll be able to bring things into this country either as capital good or something to produce this. We are endowed with so many things in this country, yet we don't do much to it. So 24-hour economy is about value addition. Agribusiness, which has been the agribusiness which has been added to the Ministry of Trade, is basically about value addition. That the agriculture produce or the product that we have in the agriculture sector, we are adding value to it. That's what agribusiness is. Add value to it before you either export it or consume it, so that you'll be able to improve the shelf life something that will rot in 10 days, you can add value to it and keep it for years and be able to increase the value when you export it. So, important statement by the former minister, but it looks as if we become a bit more knowledgeable about things when we get into opposition. When we are in government, we don't remember some of these things, but we do remember them when we get into opposition. I do believe that we will get our act together. We will work together on this for Ghana to be able to turn Ghana into a manufacturing economy. That is the only way we can survive as a country and take advantage of this African continental free trade that we keep talking about. African continental free trade, but many a times we sign agreement, but we do no preparation for those agreements, and others come and take advantage of us, and we cannot take advantage of them. So as we go along signing agreement, we also have to look at how those agreements will actually benefit us as a country, and not sit down for somebody to take advantage of us and say that we have the African Continental Free Trade headquarters sitting in Accra. And so what? What benefit are we getting out of that? And those are the things we need to look at. Mr. Speaker, I would like to end here. This is going to be a very long conversation for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honourable members. This is a very important statement. Consequentially, I will ask that the statement be transmitted to the minister responsible for trade, agribusiness, and industry for her perusal and necessary action. Honourable members, statement time has ended. Any indication from leadership? Honourable Deputy Majority Leader, any indication?
Mr. Speaker, it's been a long day. I think we would like to thank you for actually allowing the number of statements that have been made today and the contributions that we have on this. We are in your hands, and I think that we are tired.
Members, in line with Standing Order 56, it is only when we have done more than 5 hours that you can be in my hands. So once we are within the 5 hours, you cannot be in my hands. So I advise that remove a motion for adjournment.
Speaker, that is why you are so admirable. The Speaker is so admirable. Yes, what he should have done was to move a motion because Order 55.3. Ordinarily, we should be doing 5 hours, and we've done less than that. So you should be moving a motion for adjournment. Leader, take a cue and move a motion accordingly.
Speaker, it's been a long day. I didn't actually look at the time. But for the time that I have sat here, I thought we had done more than, the required time. Mr. Speaker, I would like to move that we bring proceedings to a close for today and adjourn for tomorrow, 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. For 12 o'clock, Mr. Speaker.
Tomorrow we'll adjourn to 10 o'clock. Yes, the motion has been moved for adjournment. Any seconder?
The motion he moved. In fact, he said 10 o'clock.
Yes, 10 o'clock.
Speaker, you are for 10 o'clock.
That is so.
I second the motion moved.
The motion has been moved and seconded. It's now for the consideration of the House. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The House is accordingly adjourned to Friday, the 14th day of February 2025 at 10 o'clock in the forenoon.
This is the picture. So the